Alright, hello. So this is, I guess, episode 2 of Reteaching Myself Filmmaking. This time we're getting into the definition of certain positions on a film set, and we're starting with producers because there are so many types. So, what is a film producer? What is a film producer? That definition can change somewhat depending on what kind of producer you are, but generally a good one-word definition would be management. A lot of the time they'll help bring in financing for films. In my experience, they do a lot of paperwork. In many cases, they'll influence the story and so on and so forth. The American Film Institute's official definition of producing is film producing encompasses a wide range of work involved in shepherding a film project from conception to completion. It can include securing rights to intellectual property, developing material with writers, negotiating above-the-line deals, reviewing budgets, acquiring distribution deals, and more. So yeah. But then I also have Studio Binder's official definition. So a producer guides a film from its beginning to its completion. They have a hand in organizing and scheduling, budgeting and hiring, creative problem solving and overseeing, and marketing and distribution. A producer may be a self-employed contractor or subject to the authority of an employer such as a production company or studio. They are involved throughout all phases of production from inception to completion. Bottom line, a producer is anyone who brings the project to fruition and is often the person that holds the rights to the underlying property. And then, in my own words, I added on, producers can also have an influence on the story, and that's why you'll see a lot of directors that are also producers on their own films, because they helped shape the story, choose the cast, and so on and so forth. So then we have, what are the different types of film producers? According to the PGA, aka the Producers Guild of America, there are roughly 18 types of producers, roughly 18 types. Although not every kind of producer is going to be present on every production. That's just dependent on the size and scale of the project. So, the types as specified by the Producers Guild of America are the producer, or the produced by credit, the executive producer, the co-producer, / line producer, associate producer, production manager, production supervisor, production coordinator, post-production producer, post-production supervisor, post-production coordinator, visual effects producer, visual effects associate producer, visual effects production manager, and then visual effects coordinator. And then you have 3 that are specific to TV movies, but I included them anyways. So there's co-executive producer, supervising producer, and producer. But those, they are slightly different, and so they're specific to TV movies only. So, now, what does each type of producer do? Truthfully, I'm not going to get very detailed on this because I was just digging through the Producers Guild of America, Studio Binder, No Film School, several other places. I was just looking through them to try to round out relatively good definitions for each of these, but some of them I just gave up and just quoted directly from the Producers Guild of America because you can only write relatively the same thing so many times, so this might get redundant at some point, and I apologize for that. I would also like to state that these kinds of producers, I specifically pulled this list from the feature film section of the Producers Guild of America's website. So if there's a type of producer that is specific to TV shows or something like that, I did not include it. I might do another video on that, I don't know. But for right now, I have not done that. So, we'll start with producer, aka produced by, and to quote the PGA, for theatrical motion pictures, the produced by producer collectively produced by. Credit is the primary producer. So, to go back to my earlier definition, management. They are the main manager of the project. To be this kind of producer, you have to be making important decisions, and not just once or twice, but throughout the entire production process. And because this stuff has so many details, I will be returning to quoting the PGA once again. So, a produced by's responsibilities across the 4 stages of production typically include the performance of the following producing functions in a decision-making capacity. A. Development. Developing the film's concept, securing rights and initial funding, selecting the writer, and guiding the development process. Then B. Pre-production. Selecting key creative and physical production team members, location scouting, and overseeing the final script, final schedule, and final budget. C. Production. Overseeing daily operations, consulting with and resolving issues raised by the key physical production and creative staff, and liaising. I know it's liaison. I'm not sure about in this context though. Liaising with financial, studio, and or distribution partners. And then finally, D. Post-production and marketing. Engaging closely with post-production teams and strategizing on marketing and distribution. A lot of people will hear it and they really assume that this is a lot of the stuff that a director does. And I think that's often true, but once again, many directors will also have producing credits. I imagine there aren't many. Well, that's not true, because there's a lot of movies that come out. But an example of a director who always produces his films is Christopher Nolan. He and his wife, Emma Thomas, she's the main producer on all of his films, and they produce their films through their production company. The pronunciation is slipping my mind. Syncope? Something. Incorporated. And an example of a director who did not produce his film, and from my research, I don't think has really ever produced his own films, would be Daniel Espinosa. And likely not a very popular name that you're very aware of, but you will be aware of this movie. It's likely what he would be most known for, and that's Morbius. So that project probably really would have benefited from the director having more creative control by being a producer, but unfortunately, things happen. So now, the second type of producer, executive producer. I think because the name includes the word executive, most people would assume that the produced by credit is what the executive producer does. And in some cases, that is true, but not all the time, because sometimes the executive producer is the main producer. And then, once again, to quote the Producers Guild of America, for executive producers that are not the primary producers, the credit only applies to an individual who has made essential contributions that include but are not limited to the following. And because this is a long list, I'm going to paraphrase. So, advocating for the project in early production, securing finances, and or making a big contribution to the film, to getting rights for the film during development. And then there's some more specific things that don't qualify you for it, like someone who solely provides financial backing, or their main job title, just their main involvement in the project is being a studio executive or a distributor or something like that. But if you want those specifics, just go to the PGA website. Then we have the co-producer / line producer. So the co-producer is kind of like the manager under the manager, and all below the line department heads would report to them. I would like this to be noted here for those of you who don't know anything about, I don't know if you could hear that or not, but for those of you who don't know anything about filmmaking, the below the line crew is basically everybody except for like the director, the producers, and the main cast members, and the writer, I think. Other than that, basically everybody is considered below the line. But the main job of the co-producer, line producer is budgeting, scheduling, hiring, and day-to-day production stuff. Like I said, manager underneath the manager. And that's probably not specific enough for some people, but I genuinely don't know what else to say. So then we will move on to the associate producer. The associate producer assist, but you cannot be an assistant in job title and be an associate producer. It's kind of like you help in a significant way, and in the end you might get given an associate producer credit. It's a bit more complicated than that, but say you have your own specific job, but then someone else needs help with something, so you step up, and despite everything that you're already doing, you step up and you help. But it can't just be something like sorting through papers. It has to be a significant contribution, and so then in the end the producer might be like, hey, thank you for your meaningful contribution to the making of this film. To honor that, we're gonna give you an associate producer credit. Yeah. So, next, production manager / production supervisor. Think of all of this like a pyramid. So the production manager is the manager under the manager under the manager, you know. We're just gonna keep going and going and going. Delegation, that's all this pyramid is. It's just delegation. So the production manager reports to the line producer, who reports to the producer and or executive producer. Another title that you might see get thrown around for the production manager is the unit production manager. They're the same thing. And then to once again quote the Producers Guild of America, from pre-production through the completion of production, the production manager is responsible for all physical production matters, which include day-to-day production decisions, set and location logistics, and personnel staffing management. And then we have the production supervisor, who deals with day-to-day set things. Once again, kind of paraphrasing here, they help prepare a budget and figure out staffing, manage the calendar, help develop the schedule, you know, those two kind of go hand in hand, as one would expect. Manage finances, oversee production staff, set up the production office, finalize contracts with people and unions, payroll setup, call sheets, hiring and firing, location searching, and arrangements for locations, speaking with the authorities regarding locations, that way no one gets arrested, casting crew, transportation, and housing, and so on and so forth. And then once again, if you want to get more specific, I recommend going to the PGA, or just go to like Studio Binder or No Film School or something, or Google it. I don't know. Just, this is a very general over umbrella definition video, I guess. Then we have the production coordinator. So they are under the production supervisor and or the manager. Once again, to quote the Producers Guild of America, the production coordinator interacts with various studio and production departments and is responsible for facilitating production requirements, including but not limited to equipment contracts, purchase orders, film inventory when applicable, insurance, day player contracts, crew deal memos, travel and shipping, call sheets, production reports, cast and crew lists, and compliance with various union report requirements. So basically, administration. A good one-word definition for it. They do the administrative work. Paperwork. They do the paperwork. And unfortunately, if you are a PA, aka a production assistant, this is likely who you would be working under. Now, the post-production producer. We are done with production. We're on to post-production now. So the post-production producer reports to the producer. They don't go through any of those other people. They go straight to the producer or the co-producer. And then, as the name suggests, they are over post-production. They work with the producers who are over them to figure out the budget for post-production. They, and I quote, are responsible for post-production items during principal photography, including visual effects supervision, music, pre-recorded or on-set and video playback elements, and stock footage. So they give and make sure given notes and things are done for post-production, like VFX, aka visual effects, music and audio mix. They make sure those things are done, and then they supervise the final stuff for VFX, mixing, coloring, and so on and so forth. Post-production supervisor. The post-production supervisor is pretty similar to the post-production producer. You'll see a lot of crossover with a lot of these job positions. Once again, it's a lot of delegation going on. But the supervisor manages the staff, budgets, schedules, direct principal ADR, and they're responsible for like final delivery. What's the exact wording? Final delivery and supervising / approving all technical final deliverables. And then post-production coordinator. They are under the supervisor and post-production producer, and they are responsible for facilitating post-production functions as specified? I don't know, as given to them by the post-production supervisor. So this job can kind of be anything in a way, but really, once again, it comes down to administrative work. So a lot of paperwork, scheduling, figuring out traveling if there is any, since it's post-production, and so on and so forth. Now we're done with the post-production people, and we're on to, well, technically, in name, we're done with the post-production people. Now we're on to the visual effects people. So the visual effects producer, they are over the business stuff of the visual effects department. They report directly to the main producer of the film, and then they develop the budget and scheduling and stuff for visual effects with the director and producer. And then once again, I will go back to quoting the Producers Guild of America. Hiring and managing VFX staff and crew, implementing VFX production workflows, responsible for VFX aspects during principal photography, sending out bids, and contracting VFX production houses to complete the work. I apologize for how often I am quoting the Producers Guild directly. It's about to get worse, actually, with these final producing roles, but it's because I got tired of trying to figure out how to write all this and put it in my own words, so we're just quoting directly from the Producers Guild. So, the visual effects associate producer now. Because this job description is so short, this is another one where I just quoted directly from the Producers Guild. So, the visual effects associate producer performs one or more VFX managerial and logistical functions or tasks assigned by the visual effects producer or the visual effects supervisor. And I don't know, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't think I need to elaborate on that much. Maybe, I don't know. Then we move on to the visual effects production manager, supervisor, co-producer, /. They are under the visual effects producer, and they take care of the workflow for visual effects, meaning the step-by-step process of what happens. The step-by-step process of what happens and where it goes and things like that. But they manage that from beginning to end. They will also deal with things like scheduling and budgeting, and then they'll work with different VFX companies. Once again, managerial duties and administrative work. And then the visual effects coordinator. They are under the visual effects production manager. While the manager manages workflow, they facilitate the workflow, so they make sure things actually get going and run smoothly. Yet again, manager under the manager kind of a situation. And according to the Producers Guild, they track data captured on set or in creative reviews with the filmmakers. They transmit clear information about approvals or revisions of work and coordinate with the other departments in sharing and receiving key information for shooting and post-production. And then finally, we move on to the final three that are for TV producing. I wasn't really sure of how to break this one down, how to break any of these down actually, so these are just straight up direct quotes from the Producers Guild, as half of this has been anyways, but there wasn't even an attempt from me to try to put this into my own words. So, alright, I had to stop for a second because my phone ran out of space. I don't know if I got co-executive producer for TV or not, but I'm gonna say it again just in case. We move on to TV movies now. The co-executive producer, to quote directly from the Producers Guild of America, the credit of co-executive producer is given only in rare or unique circumstances to an individual who reports directly to and works directly with the primary producing executive producer, assuming direct supervisory responsibilities for significant producing functions encompassing both above and below the line operations. Now we move on to the supervising producer, once again, only for television movies. And then once again, to quote directly from the Producers Guild of America, in television movies where the executive producer is the primary producer, the credit of supervising producer is given only in rare or unique circumstances to a primary creative contributor who reports directly to the executive producer and or co-executive producer and performs a substantial number of producing functions in a decision-making capacity. And then finally, we have producer. Once again, only in television movies. In television movies, where the executive producer is the primary producer, the individual receiving producer credit has the primary responsibility for ensuring that the creative vision of the primary producing executive producer and director are faithfully executed within the approved budgetary parameters. And then resources. If you would like to learn anything more about producers or producing, of course, the Producers Guild of America. Can't go wrong with that. Now, to be fair, I don't know how much of certain stuff they have on their website and everything. Truthfully, I haven't browsed it much, which I probably should have done before making this video and trying to recommend it as a resource. But can you really do better looking for information on producers than the Producers Guild? Exactly. And then I would also say Studio Binder. They're great. They're always great. Have a ton of information and it's available in a very palatable way. If you like videos, they have a ton of YouTube videos. If you prefer to read the information, then they also have a blog and all kinds of things. So Studio Binder's great. No Film School is a pretty good resource as well. But yeah, with a lot of this stuff though, you'll probably notice, as I'm pretty sure I've said before, you'll notice that a lot of the roles will have some of the same responsibilities, and that's, once again, depending on the size of the production, delegating is necessary. Absolutely necessary. Even on a smaller scale, I think you'd see a lot of crossover with certain jobs, and that's just because filmmaking, it takes a lot of paperwork. It takes a lot of paperwork and scheduling and managing and budgeting and all kinds of things. It's hard for one person to just take care of all that. So yeah, so that's it. I think. At least I don't have anything else to say. If I got anything wrong, no, I didn't. Ignore it. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say. So, like, subscribe, and goodbye.